Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, this is Canadian real estate market update with a particular focus on Vancouver. If you get any sort of value or entertainment out of these videos, I'll ask that you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Appreciate the support. As always, any questions, comments, put those below. Couple of things to sort of get through today. This might be a little bit of a longer video. Some topics that I want to touch on is recent dollar volumes, not only in Canadian real estate, but in BC as well, and how that sort of impacts tax revenues, etc. Some of the things that are happening in China right now that are important to keep an eye on. Some of the and some developments here in the Vancouver pre-sale condo market as well. That again, I believe are worth keeping an eye on. So we'll take all these and sort of put them all in together, and as well a quick touch on the Airbnb. So first and foremost, looking at the Canadian real estate market, again, the sort of this whole stabilization picture. You're looking at in June a real estate market which year over year dollar volumes, which is the total amount spent on Canadian real estate, declined 12% on a year over year basis. Again, that's not seasonally adjusted. This is actual sales figures from a year over year perspective. So you have the dollar volume drop 12%, and we have an economy that is so heavily predicated on housing investment. This has a substantial impact, obviously, on the broader economy, people that are employed. There's a recent saying out there from, I believe it's Peter Brockfar. He runs a hedge fund, but he's a very astute credit analyst. And the analogy where he put forward is you don't really have business cycles anymore. You have credit cycles, and it's generally not a recession which causes housing prices or housing slowdown. It's actually the housing slowdown which causes the recession. And so when you have this many people and this much investment in Canada that is geared towards real estate, any sort of slowdown in that for a prolonged period of time is going to lead to an inevitable recession at some point. Basically have to redistribute not only labor but capital into different resources, so it's difficult to make that transition. You can't make that transition overnight, and so we're obviously seeing these dollar volumes, and that's sort of the impact behind that. And if you look at it in BC, BC dollar volumes on a year-over-year basis in June dropped 33%. You look at this from a government's perspective. One thing they'd love from a real estate boom is tax revenues. So you have to look at property transfer taxes. I mean, it's a huge tax grab for these guys. And you're seeing the total amount spent on real estate decline by 33%. And this has been continuing for some time now. You have to look at this in historical context. So from 2015 to 2016, which is really our boom period, that was probably peak market activity. Property transfer taxes for the BC government from 2015 to 2016 increased by 44% year over year. I mean, that kind of increase. So I think that year they registered like a $700 million surplus in their budget. Property transfer taxes ticked in at $1.5 billion for the BC government. So they're going to have to look, especially with this NDP government that's coming in and is determined to slow down housing markets. They're going to have to find a different source of tax revenue. I don't know where that's going to come from. I don't know how business friendly these guys are, but certainly when you're slowing down the golden goose, 24-25% of GDP in BC is predicated on the real estate sector. Again, they're going to have to look and get creative. And again, I think that this creates serious misallocations of labor and capital moving forward as these people start to transition, right? You're going to have 14,000 realtors in Vancouver alone. There's certainly going to be, in my opinion, a reduction of realtors in the coming years as this market heads into a prolonged slowdown. So keeping an eye on that. I think that's always sort of fascinates me. I guess this sort of transitions into the pre-sale condo market in Vancouver, which is now reporting slower, weaker sales absorption rates. So, in June, the pre-sale absorption rate was just over 90%, which is extremely high. I would argue that was actually the top of the Vancouver condo market. That's when we actually saw the peak pricing. You had a lot of people moving in before the stress test, trying to secure properties before pre-approvals expired, etc. That was arguably the peak of the market. It looks to be the peak of the pre-sale market as well. The pre-sale absorption rate has actually shifted back down to about 49% as of June 2018. So you can see that starting to slow down. And you can see that just not only in the stats, but through their sales promotions as well. Decorating bonuses of $15,000, $20,000, realtor bonuses of $10,000, $15,000. So there's a lot of bonuses that they're incentivizing. They want to keep prices stable, and one way to do that, at least on the surface, is to provide that incentives through bonuses. So you're sort of keeping those prices firm, but you're actually offering $25,000 in bonuses. So without actually affecting the price. So you're starting to see that in the pre-sale market. I think one of the changes that we'll be keeping an eye on is the pre-sale. The BC government actually recently came out with some changes to the basically they're trying to clamp down on tax evasion, money laundering, etc. And I think one of the markets that is probably the prone to a lot of CRA probes in the future is that pre-sale condo space. People that are buying condos with no intention to live in them, assigning them, flipping them before completion and not paying the full capital gains. A lot of the situations actually wouldn't even be capital gains. It could be applied as a full income earned. If you're in the real estate profession or you have a history of doing this, is actually going to be taxed as an income, not as a capital gains. And so BC is putting into legislation that they now must report moving in September. Once this gets passed, they're actually going to have to create the database, which they already have, but they're actually going to have to report that database to the BC government and to CRA. So everyone's going to have an open book on who is buying these pre-sales, who is flipping these pre-sales, who's paying taxes, who isn't paying taxes, etc. Obviously that can start to discourage foreign investment, which has been really propping up a lot of the pre-sale market. In Vancouver, when you have pre-sales starting at $1,800 a square foot downtown, it's really not a local market. You can buy a resale unit for, it's 1, 2, 3 years old for $1,200 a square foot. That $1,800 a foot doesn't really make much sense. But of course, if you're flogging it over in Hong Kong, it's an attractive buy. But again, we're starting to see that slow down. We're starting to see the pre-sales slow down. And that, again, that's sort of a lot of it to do is with the appetite from foreign investment, particularly from China. But this isn't just a Vancouver thing. It never is. Vancouver is a very micro market. This is part of a larger global picture where you're seeing a slowdown in Australia and a lot of these luxury markets. If you actually look at Chinese investment into U.S. real estate, you can see that sales have clearly peaked out. They're actually, on the commercial side of things, Chinese investment, they're actually net sellers of commercial real estate in the United States. So the real estate buffet is over. It's for the Chinese, at least as it is right now. This could be temporary, but all those outflows were 2015, 2016. You can start to see them receding, particularly here in 2018. One thing that I will be keeping an eye on is the devaluation of the Chinese yuan. That's China's in a it truly is a wild card. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen over there, but they have the single largest credit binge in history, and they're trying to basically deleverage that into sort of this peaceful landing. And so they're basically trying to repatriate a whole bunch of their capital from offshore so they can sort of simultaneously have this soft landing in China. And every time they start to deleverage, the whole system wobbles and they have to inject a lot more liquidity into the system. So I don't know if they're going to get to this peaceful deleveraging, but certainly they're trying to keep capital reserves in China, and so that's why they're trying to restrict those outflows. But obviously, if you get to a point where you start devaluing that yuan so much, people are going to be looking very aggressively to get their money out of China because they don't want to see their money devalued. So I don't know. Right now, that's not that right now is certainly not showing up in real estate. Again, whether that's in Vancouver, you can look at it not only in the pre-sale market, but in the luxury market. That is a very dead market right now. And again, you can see it with the U.S. numbers. But, we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Chinese credit deleveraging, with the Chinese yuan devaluation, if things start to change. But again, that's sort of where we're at today. I look at this pre-sale market again. I've talked about this in numerous videos. I think it's an enormous amount of risk for someone to be taking on today when these pre-sales are still charging a premium at a time when the resale market, which they're competing with, is seeing sales decline by 30% and inventory climbing by 40, 50, 60, 70%. In Langley, it's over 100%. So your inventory is climbing. So this is going to be a very competitive market in order, you have the pre-sales versus the resales, and, you have a very dwindling supply of buyers for these products. So, if you're locking in a pre-sale today that doesn't complete for 2 or 3 years, it becomes a question of financing, right? So from a mortgage perspective, you're going to get pre-approved for a mortgage today. So if you go into the pre-sale center and you get pre-approved, the bank says, yeah, we'll pre-approve you for, based on the value of this condo at $700,000 today. But if you go to close in 2 years and the value of that condo is $600K, the bank's going to basically, you have to reapply for the financing in 2 years. And so the bank's going to say, well, no, hold on. We only see the value of this condo at $600K. You're going to have to come up with that extra $100K. So you're taking on the risk, but you're not being incentivized for it. So I think that's something to take note of. Sort of last but not least, looking at it, a couple of people have asked me this question about Airbnb. There's been some changes recently by the BC government where previously the strata corporations in the province of BC were only allowed a maximum fine of $200 per week for anyone violating short-term tenancy bylaws such as Airbnb. So if you're renting your Airbnb unit out illegally against the strata's bylaws, they could only fine you $200 per week. The BC government has introduced legislation and passed it that is now allowing the strata corporations to charge a penalty of $1,000 per day. $1,000 per day, not $200 per week. So if the strata exercises their right to do that, that's certainly going to discourage a lot of people from Airbnb-ing their unit, illegally. And obviously in the city of Vancouver, their bylaws permit any investment property from being rented out on Airbnb. It has to be a primary residence in order to be rented out on Airbnb. So I think that's I don't think it's going to make a material impact to the market. But I do think that it's, for someone that's looking to do Airbnbs, I would caution against it, particularly at this point in time. I just think you're going to get whacked with a bunch of fines. I do think this probably discourages some of those speculative buyers that were maybe looking for that type of unit. Maybe it brings on a few more new listings onto the condo market, but I don't think it's going to make any material impact. That's where we stand today. So as always, hope this helped. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.